Well, there's still a lot of recruiting action going on, but the season is coming too. It's just 2 months away, a little more than 2 months away. So we're going to continue our position preview series today with a look at Pitt's running backs. How do you replace a 1,400-yard rusher who led the nation in rushing touchdowns? Probably with a committee, but we'll look into the group today and break down Pitt's running backs here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's midweek edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from YouTube. Nope. Well, I am from youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, but primarily I'm from Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You know the deal. We say it every day that's what it is, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, and I like to think that we prove it to some extent every day, do our best at least. Had a pretty big recruiting update for you yesterday, very early on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, and of course recruiting coverage and team coverage, football, basketball, recruiting, everything going on throughout the day, all day, every day, Panther-Lair.com. And speaking of all day, every day, the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. They are bumping all day, every day. Pitt fans talking about Pitt sports. You yourself are a Pitt fan. I presume that's why you're watching this. So you want to check out the message boards, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. And of course, what we always ask you to do right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com is like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's pretty easy. I think the like button's down there and the subscribe button is right down here. And if you're watching this as an embedded video content item on Panther-Lair.com, just click anywhere on the video really, and it should take you to our YouTube page where you can like the video and subscribe. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so you never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. These daily Morning Pitt videos that we run every day, Monday through Friday, or our weekly live show, which should be tonight, but it's not going to be tonight. We're moving it to tomorrow night. For this week, we're shifting nights. Tomorrow night, Thursday night, we'll be live at 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett. Jim will be back from his vacation to sunny Stone Harbor, and he will be here to talk Pitt sports with us. So that'll be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. Don't tune in tonight. The live show is tomorrow night, Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. So keep that in mind as you plan your day and plan your evening. It's the summer. We might switch up some days every now and then, but we'll be as consistent as possible to keep the show rolling. Now, obviously, we've been talking a lot of recruiting. Recruiting's been the main subject and main topic throughout for the last month plus, and we're going to keep that going. There's a big commitment announcement tonight. We talked about that already on yesterday's show. 4-star safety Coy Beasley making his commitment tonight. Not really thinking that it's going to go Pitt's way, but we'll see what happens with that. And of course, we'll recap the decision, whether it's good or bad, whether it's in Pitt's favor or not, tomorrow. But as we be going, we started this last Wednesday. We're going to be doing some position preview stuff and kind of going position by position, breaking down where Pitt stands heading into the 2023 season. And last week we started off with the quarterbacks, which is a natural place to start, and we move forward from there through the offense with the running backs. How do you replace a guy who rushed for 1,400 yards in 11 games, had 9 100-yard games, who scored 20 rushing touchdowns to lead the nation in touchdowns, led the ACC in touchdowns and all-purpose yards and points per game, who was an All-American, an all-conference selection? How do you replace a guy who did that? Well, it's not going to be easy. And chances are it's probably going to take a group of running backs to replace that production. And I kind of like the group that Pitt has put together so far this year, but they're largely unproven. And so let's talk about that group, who they are, how they fit in, and how they're going to replace what Israel Abanikanda did last season. To start with, I think it's always important, and if I've said this once, I've said this a million times over the last 15 years. I think it's always important to look back at the recruiting. Anytime you want to look at a position group on a current team, you want to look at a current team overall, and you want to find out why they are the way that they are, either why they're as good as they are, or why they're as bad as they are, or why they're as unpredictable as they are, or unknown, or uncertain, or whatever it is. If you want to find answers to those questions, you look in the recruiting. You always look in the recruiting. And so let's look at the recruiting. Let's look at the recruiting classes that should have put players on the current, or potentially could put players on the current roster. Now, due to the COVID year, anybody who was on a roster in 2020 gets an extra year of eligibility. So we'll count all the way back to the 2018 recruiting class. So 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and this incoming class of 2023. In theory, guys from the 2018 recruiting class, like Devin Danielson and Jake Cradle and Blake Zabovic, Tyler Bentley and David Green, those guys, just like Nick Patty could have been, guys from the 2018 recruiting class could be on this year's roster as super seniors. So we'll go back to there. And I think running back is probably a position where you're not going to expect to have too many super seniors hanging around, although Pitt, we'll get to it in a second, is maybe a bit of an exception to that rule. But still, potentially, recruits from those 6 classes could have players on the current roster. So where are those 6 classes? 2018 recruiting class. Pitt signed 1 but kind of 2 running backs. We'll talk about the 1 first. In Michael Salahuddin, 4-star running back, was committed to USC, ended up decommitting and landed at Pitt, and came in as a much ballyhooed recruit. I mean, I think one of the highest rated recruits in the Narduzzi era. Came in and kind of had a decent freshman year, averaged, he didn't carry the ball much, but he averaged like 11 yards per carry or something like that. Showed a little promise, showed a little potential. Seemed like he might be able to play, but it never really worked out. He was never really in the role that he wanted to be. I don't think he had as prominent of a role as he hoped for in 2018. Maybe because they had 2 running backs rushing for 1,000 yards each. I don't know. Maybe that kind of blocks your way a little bit if you're a running back trying to make his way as a freshman when you've got a couple of upperclassmen like Quadri Olson and Darren Hall sitting in front of you and taking all those carries, even though those 2 guys were, well into their careers at that point. I think both were seniors in 2018. But that's neither here nor there. Michael Salahuddin didn't feel like it was a good spot for him, so he ends up transferred to North Carolina A&T to be a defensive back. Played there for a few years, and now he's playing his final year of eligibility at Bowie State, again as a defensive back. He is going to play as a super senior, but not as a super senior running back. So that's where he is. His time at North Carolina A&T was largely unremarkable. I don't even think he played in every game last season. He didn't make any starts. He was a defensive back. Maybe got some return opportunities, although I don't really know if he even returned any kicks. Now he's playing at Bowie State, so he's gone. They also signed Valik Carter in that class, and we bring up Carter, even though he signed as a defensive back, his primary contributions, his only contributions, came as a running back. You remember his debut game against Duke in 2018, the game where they scored 54 points, and Carter had 2 of those touchdowns to contribute to those scores. He carried the ball 7 times for 137 yards. One of the great random breakout performances from a guy who was barely ever heard from again. Valik Carter blows up against Duke. And quite frankly, and someone else made this point to me, that Pitt may not have won the Coastal Division in 2018 and advanced to the ACC championship game that season, if not for Valik Carter. Maybe they beat Duke that game. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But he ran, like I say, 7 for 137 and 2 touchdowns in a game where they scored 54 points and really needed every single one of those points. I would say that was a pretty valuable contribution from him. So maybe they don't even make it to Charlotte that year, if not for Valik Carter. The next year, he helps beat Duke again, scores a game-winning touchdown. If you recall, a little pass over the middle, makes a spin move to score the game-winning touchdown at Duke in Durham in 2019, and then he goes into the transfer portal. I forget exactly what the move was. Either Pitt wanted him to stay at running back and he wanted to move back to defensive back, or vice versa, but he left and transferred to Albany, which was, seemed okay. You move down a level and you're going to play. Todd Sibley would do that same move a few years later. Except the following season was 2020. And Albany, what are they playing? The CAA or something like that. Canceled. The season was canceled. So he never played. Transfers again. Transfers to Arkansas Pine Bluff ahead of the 2021 season. But Valik Carter, unfortunately, was arrested in the summer of 2021. I don't know what the resolution was to his legal situation. I don't know the details on his legal situation, but I couldn't find him on Pine Bluff's roster for this past season, this 2022 season, or any real stats or anything for 21. So not really sure what happened with Malik Carter. So my point is, 2018 class, Michael Salahuddin, Malik Carter, neither one of them is contributing to Pitt in 2023. Let's move forward to 2019. Pitt signed 2 more running backs in 2019, a Thunder and Lightning combination of Daniel Carter and Vincent Davis. We know, I think, the story with both of those guys. Carter's still on the roster, largely in a fullback role, although he considers himself capable of playing tailback. Vincent Davis had played 4 years at Pitt. He's going to be a super senior, and he's going to use that year at UNLV. Best of luck to him. I think Carter would like to see himself in a bigger role this season. I'm not sure if he's going to find that role as far as being a tailback. We'll get into that more as we break down the depth chart here, but I see him in a fullback role, and I think he can be utilized. I think you can put the ball in his hands in different ways, either catching passes out of the backfield, handoffs on short yardage situations, and I think he can make things happen. And if you get enough of those effective short yardage handoffs to the fullback, he can become a bit of a decoy. And maybe open things up even more for you in the passing game, or tosses, things like that. If you run play action, fake the handoff, fake the fullback dive, and then move from there. But he's still on the roster. 2020, Pitt signed 1 running back. That's Izzy Abanikanda. You know his story. He ended up being one of the best running backs in the nation last year, went in the NFL draft this year. So he's not here on this roster. 2021, Pitt signed 2 more running backs, looking to try and fill in some gaps, make up, they needed to cover for guys like Salahuddin and Malik Carter, who didn't pan out and left. So they signed 2 running backs, Rodney Hammond and Malik Newton. Newton was probably the more highly regarded of those 2 running backs, but he was medically disqualified when he arrived on campus in January. Ended up transferring to West Virginia State, played in 2021, carried the ball, averaged about 5 yards per carry, 5.5 yards per carry, scored 3 touchdowns on about 115 rushing attempts at West Virginia State. Can't really find any indication that he played for them last year, though. Yes, Pitt medically disqualified him. He found a school that didn't have an issue with whatever his medical condition was. I can't find any indication that he played anywhere this past year. I think it seemed to look like he was transferring again, but I'm not entirely sure. So don't know what his situation is. Rodney Hammond, of course, is still on the roster. Hammond, having carried the ball more than 200 times over the last 2 seasons for 960 yards, 10 touchdowns, 5 each year, and a career average of 4.6 yards per carry. We'll talk about Hammond in a second, but I think he's a running back who has had Pitt fans pretty excited from the time he started carrying the ball. I think there are high expectations for him. There were high hopes for him, and I think in 2021 it was a pass-heavy offense that just focused on getting the ball, having the ball go from Kenny Pickett to Jordan Addison and occasionally Lucas Krull and Gavin Bartholomew and Jared Wayne. But that was the primary focus. And guys like Vincent Davis and Rodney Hammond and Izzy Abanikanda got whatever scraps were left over. Last year he probably would have had a better opportunity, but he got hurt pretty bad in the West Virginia game and missed a decent amount of the season. Still came back and had some big games last year. But obviously he was playing behind a guy who rushed for 1,400 yards and 20 touchdowns, so he wasn't going to be the primary ball carrier. And then in the 2022 recruiting class, Pitt signed Jordan Bailey, running back out of Florida, a real kind of multi-threat running back, could catch passes and was even being recruited as a receiver by some schools. He didn't make the grades, and so he couldn't. So he didn't qualify and couldn't enroll at Pitt in June. He ended up going to Chowan University, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, Chowan. I'm going to say it Chowan, like the name Rowan. It's in North Carolina. It's a D2 school. And he went there. He was actually listed on the Chowan roster as a wide receiver. Carried the ball about 38 times, averaged 5 yards per carry, scored 3 touchdowns. He got 23 passes, averaged about 10 yards per catch, and scored another touchdown. And then went into the transfer portal. He announced in January, I think it was, that he was going into the transfer portal. He was going to leave Chowan University and find somewhere else to go. And I haven't seen any indication of where he ended up. So best of luck to him. I have no idea. However, as I was looking this up, I found out, as I was trying to find out where Chowan University plays and what division they're in. They're a D2 school, like I say. Chowan University actually, among its notable alums, not listed on the school website, of course, but on Wikipedia and Google. If you Google Chowan University, the first notable alum that comes up is the architect of the 9/11 attacks, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. How about that? I had no idea he went to college in North Carolina. He didn't finish at Chowan University, though. He transferred to North Carolina A&T, where Michael Salahuddin also transferred. What is the connection between Pitt running backs and the architect of the 9/11 attacks? You tell me. Your eyes open now? This thing's going the wrong direction here. So, that brings us up to date. And then Pitt signed 2 running backs this year, 2 freshmen, Montravius Lloyd and TJ Harbison. Harbison enrolled in January. Impressed the coaches. Had a really good spring camp by all indications. Montravius Lloyd arrived earlier this month, probably last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. He's more of a multiple weapon type of back. He can catch a lot of passes. He caught a lot of passes in high school. And so he can carry the ball and be a threat in the passing game. So that kind of brings you up to date on where the roster is. But obviously with the misses, and I don't mean the wife, with the misses over the years, you look over these 5 recruiting classes prior to this, Pitt signed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 running backs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, 6 of them are no longer on the roster. So out of the last 5 recruiting classes leading into this year, not counting Harbison and Lloyd, when you're talking about Salahuddin, Valik Carter, Vincent Davis, Daniel Carter, Izzy Abanikanda, Rodney Hammond, Malik Newton, and Jordan Bailey, of those 8 players, only Daniel Carter and Rodney Hammond are still on the roster. And running backs aren't going to last forever. Running backs aren't going to stay around. It's a position where players often tend to leave early. But still, 8 guys out of 5 classes and only 2 are left. That's not a great retention rate. And there are a lot of reasons why it happened. They're not all the same thing. Michael Salahuddin didn't want to wait for his spot. Valik Carter made just a curious decision. Vincent Davis, I think, was done with his time at Pitt. And I think that was sort of a situation of, okay, you've got another year. Feel free to use it as you like, wherever you like. Malik Newton was disqualified. Jordan Bailey couldn't make the grade. So, I mean, it's not all a matter of guys just bailing. But the sum result is that you've got 2 players from the last 5 classes on the roster at running back. It's part of the big reason they signed 2 running backs in 2023, the guys who are coming in as freshmen this year. And it's part of the reason that I think they're going to try and take 2 running backs in this 2024 class. The guys that they're recruiting right now took official visits this month. They need to reload those numbers, and they've obviously helped out the situation by bringing in a few transfers. Sibo Flemister joined as a transfer from Notre Dame last offseason, played intermittently throughout the year, actually had 1 carry against West Virginia, fumbled that snap, that 1 carry that he had. Over the next 7 games, he played 12 offensive snaps, according to Pro Football Focus, and carried the ball just 10 times over the next 7 games. Now, he finished on a hot streak. Final 4 games of the regular season for Sibo Flemister last year. 29 carries, 176 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's a 6.1 yards per carry average in those final 4 games. And this is a way to segue into the discussion of the running backs themselves, because we talk about Rodney Hammond, and rightfully so. He's the lead back coming into this 2023 season. He's the guy who's going to be on the field for the first snap of the game. He's going to be getting the primary, the bulk of the carries. He's going to be the workhorse. But don't sleep on Sibo Flemister. I think particularly in the Miami game, when he went 7 for 89 and a touchdown, particularly in the Miami game, he showed that he's not just some hump out there. He can run. He's got speed. He might be the closest thing to a home run hitter that they've got. And that was really something that separated Izzy Abanikanda last year. He wasn't just grinding out 4 yards at a time. When he got that opening, he could be gone. And this is one of my biggest concerns with Pitt's running back core this year, is I need to see that guy emerge who, when the blocking is set up right and he finds a little bit of daylight, he can go. That it's not just a 7-yard gain or a 13-yard gain, but it's a 65-yard gain. It's a 40-yard run. It's a 70-yard run. They need someone who can strike fast like that, particularly when we don't know if the passing game is going to be able to strike deep. You have to be able to have explosive plays. You have to be able to strike. You have to be able to attack from all distances and all spots on the field. The passing game, I think, has some major question marks about whether they're going to be able to do that. Last year they could make up for it because they had a running back who could do it. This year they need to find out if they have a running back who can do it. Sibo Flemister, I think, is a sleeper candidate to be that guy. And I think he showed it a little bit late in the season last year, the final 4 games of the regular season, the games in the month of November when they went on that 4-game winning streak. He carried the ball 30 times in those 4 games, averaged better than 6 yards per carry, and scored 2 touchdowns. A lot of that production came in the Miami game with 90 yards and 1 touchdown. But I think he showed what he can do. So you've got Rodney Hammond, who, I think Andre Powell sort of described it as Rodney's the kind of guy where he gets the ball, he goes into the pile, you think he stopped for 3, but he ends up getting 5 or he ends up getting 6. That's good. He needs to show that he can break some longer runs. But if your main duo, your main ball carriers are Rodney Hammond and Sibo Flemister, I think you've got a lot of versatility in the group and a lot of different ways you can attack. I think you've got a lot of potential for explosive plays. And then there's Derek Davis. And we haven't really I haven't mentioned Derek Davis yet, but you certainly know who he is. Former 4-star prospect out of Gateway, went to LSU as a safety in the recruiting class of 2021, played defense there in 21, played defense there for the most part in 2022 until the final month or so of the season, switched full-time to running back, carried the ball 11 times for 57 yards and a touchdown, averaged more than 5 yards per carry. In those 2 games that he played 1 game against UAB, 1 game, the bowl game against Purdue when LSU killed Purdue. But in those 2 games, averaged more than 5 yards per carry. He's probably the wild card here, the biggest wild card out of this group. I think you know what Hammond is. I'm fairly confident in what Sibo Flemister should be able to do. Derek Davis can be the wild card as the third back who is going to get some playing time. Running backs get hurt. Running backs get banged up. Running backs have to miss time. And if you're a team that wants to run the ball as much as Pitt does, running backs you're going to need to cycle guys in and out. And so Davis is going to get his opportunities, and if he doesn't maximize or capitalize on them, then it might be TJ Harbison who gets the opportunities. But Davis is going to get some shots out there. He's going to get some chances to run the ball and show whether or not he can make plays. I don't know what to expect from him. He was an explosive athlete at Gateway. I think straight line speed, he could take off and run. Maybe he could be the home run hitting threat. To me, he's number 3 on the depth chart now. Either to be in competition with that spot with TJ Harbison or to compete with Flemister for the number 2 role. I think it's going to be a committee approach. I don't know if I see this team having a 1,400-yard rusher, but I do think this team could come close to matching last year's rushing production with a group effort from Rodney Hammond, Sibo Flemister, Derek Davis, and potentially the freshman. But it's a question mark. And I think there are several key question marks, like I said, about the home run hitter, of who that's going to be. And what Flemister and or Davis can do with more carries than they've gotten. I mean, Flemister had, what did he end up with? 39 carries last year. Davis had 11 carries last year. I mean, these guys need a full workload or something more than 100 carries, maybe 150 carries or something like that, 120, 110 carries to find out what they can do. I mean, this team, I think, is still going to have a heavy emphasis on the run until the passing game shows that it can carry the load. And that's going to create opportunities for guys like Flemister and Davis, in addition to Rodney Hammond, who I think should have a big year. Now, last year, and I'm going to keep bringing this up until it's not in my interest to do so anymore. Last year in August, one of my predictions in the 3-2-1 column, we have 3 things we know, 2 questions we have, and 1 prediction. In August, I wrote a prediction that Pitt would have the ACC's leading rusher 2 years in a row. That it would be Izzy Abanikanda in 2022, Rodney Hammond in 2023. I'm half right. I'm halfway there. Just got to finish the deal this year. Now, if it becomes clear that Rodney Hammond is not going to do that, I'll have to check the exact wording if I mentioned Hammond specifically or if just my prediction was that Pitt would have the ACC's leading rusher 2 years in a row. So maybe I leave the door open for Sibo or Derek Davis or somebody. But if it starts to look like Pitt's not going to have the ACC's leading rusher, then I'll stop bringing this up. But until then, you're never going to hear the end of it from me because that's the way it works with predictions, right? We run away from them as fast as we can when they start to go south. But as long as they're in play, just never shut up about it. All right, that's the running back room. That's what we see out of it. That's what I kind of expect this year. Leave your thoughts in the comments or on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. What you think about the running backs, what you think about the connection to KSM and the 9/11 attacks, and Chowan State University or Chowan University in North Carolina A&T, because there's something happening there. But leave your comments on all those topics, on the running backs in particular, Rodney Hammond, Sebo Flemister, Derek Davis, the freshman coming in, what happened to Pitt's running back core over the past 5 years, how all these numbers have kind of fallen away. And be delighted to have that conversation. Remember, no live Panther-Lair show tonight. We're moving it to tomorrow night. It'll be Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammett here to talk Pitt sports with you. So tune in for that. We look forward to it right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate that. And in the meantime, hope you've had a good start to the week. It's the middle of the week here, so I hope hump day goes well for you. And we'll be back with you tomorrow morning for another Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.